Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I had prepared to introduce myself and the panelists, but, well, we already gained some time. I no longer have to do this, so that's very good. The session will be a little bit shorter, as there was a little bit of delay in starting the session, so we will try to wrap this up within the next 40 minutes. I'm very happy to be here on the main stage. I'm also very happy that I'm able to, I was invited to moderate this session, and as we have three excellent panelists. And this will be a bit of a kind of a roundtable structure, where we'll be asking you some specific questions and general questions for all of you to reflect on. And then we see how many interesting topics that we can cover within the remaining 39 minutes. Okay, well, first of all, I think as this is the session is called the launch session of the Global Knowledge Index. We have a new knowledge index which has been published today, and you can find different versions of the report in the main hall. I think I would first want to ask Dr. Torki to reveal a little bit about how the 2025 index is different from the 2024 index as the measurement framework has changed. A few words why we had this revision, and maybe also if you could share 2 or 3 of the key or main results of the 2025 Global Knowledge Index.
شكرا دكتور هيوغو.
Thank you, Dr. Hugo. And thank you, Your Excellency, the Minister, and Pedro. Thank you very much, esteemed audience, for attending this session. I believe Dr. Hugo did not introduce himself. He is the team leader of the Global Knowledge Index team with us in this project. And of course, he has an exceptional team consisting of scientists and experts that are with us here and in other halls. So I wanted to quickly thank them. I know that we are out of time, but I wanted to thank Dr. Mu'taz, Sylvain, Daniela, Christopher, Jeremy, Loku, and all the experts that are with us here today. So why did we change the Global Knowledge Index for 2024 to 2025? The reason, first, because of the drastic change that we have experienced in data. We've lost a lot of data. That was the first reason. The second, a lot of indexes, international or global indexes that are connected to education have stopped, and the latest changes to various sects, and that was the main reason why we changed this index. Another reason is that the index in previous years covered a limited number of countries, 141, and we felt in the UNDP that we don't want to leave anyone behind. So we were thinking, how can we cover the 195 countries all over the world? So we had to change our statistical methodology as well as the theoretical methodology that we've been aided by the experts, and we thank you here. This is the second reason why we wanted to change the index. The third reason has to do with the sects itself. The education and professional training section or industry, we had to change it because we didn't like the data that we had, as well as finally the enabling sector, and we wanted to change it from an embracing to a sector that measures the impact. So this is the main reasons, and I don't know what to add because I'm out of time. One of the main outcomes, as if you asked me, first, we have a weakness in the data that has to do with education and professional sector. This is not just in the Arab world, but all over the world. As for the research and development, the average is still one of the weakest sectors in the index. And remember that the index was since 2017. R&D index has always been there, but we had to review it to perceive it from another perception. And as I've said, if there is any crisis or any change, we cannot face it if we don't measure the R&D. The third thing, and one of the most important outcomes, that Switzerland took the first position or place followed by Sweden, Denmark, and then Holland, the Netherlands. As for the Arab world, the UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that were in the first places. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I invite everyone to take a look at the report, but also to take a look at the website, where you will also find a kind of a visualization tool which will help you to better understand how countries are performing, also comparing countries with each other, and also looking into more detail into the different sub-indexes and the indicators.
معلش أنا ذكرت الأسماء ونسيت أذكر برضه.
Excuse me, I forgot to mention Dr. Najwa from the education sector, so I apologize for not remembering earlier.
Mention Jeremy, who also made a contribution to the education sector. Okay, to proceed, as we have limited time, and I did prepare, well, maybe not a long list of questions, but at least some questions. Next, Dr. Wuri, in your role of Minister of Technical and Higher Education, which actually is one of the sub-indexes in the Global Innovation Index, how do you see the role of the education sector in developing knowledge? And in particular, do you think that countries which are in different stages of their development, either economic development or human development, if they need different educational policies?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to also thank the organizers for inviting me to share my views on this very important topic, and congratulations on the launch of the Global Knowledge Index. So education, and when I say education, it goes beyond my sector. I think of it as in its entirety, from foundational learning to basic to senior secondary to technical and higher education. It forms the entire pipeline through which knowledge is built, through which knowledge is interpreted, and in interpreting that knowledge, you can make informed decisions and how knowledge is being applied. So the foundation is made at basic and senior secondary, and at technical and higher education, we build upon that foundation. And it goes beyond just the technical skills, but also how we foster soft skills, critical thinking that would help them in terms of making these informed decisions. Now, in terms of the role that higher educational institutions play in contributing to the knowledge index, in Sierra Leone, as with most countries in Africa, the core functions of our universities or higher educational institutions is research, teaching, and community service. And research, as you know, it's what we use to generate evidence that can inform policy and practice, but then we need to think beyond that. I remember participating in a conference where my counterpart from Zimbabwe challenged us that we are limiting ourselves within the continent, and that we should consider adding industrialization and innovation as the core functions of our universities, because that's the only way we can position our higher educational institutions to generate evidence, data that can inform policy and practice, but also how you can turn ideas into innovations, and that would ultimately contribute towards national development. So engaging in research, it has to be research that speaks to a national need. You have to engage in research that could be translated, that would be beneficial to development at country level, but also think globally. Earlier we were talking, and a phrase came up that you act locally, but you think globally as well. And so for me, universities have to take their rightful position in ensuring that they engage in needs-based research, thinking of it in its entirety. How do you build capacity? How do you ensure that you invest in the right systems? How do you ensure that it's not fragmented, it's sustainable? How do you create spaces where young people can think innovatively and turn their ideas into innovations? And that would support national development. And different countries will have different policies when it comes to the role that education plays in knowledge. You have low middle income countries where the priority might be foundational learning and providing equitable access to education. You have countries that are transitioning and they might have a different priority. And you have high income countries where they have better structures and systems in place. So there you're talking innovation, industrialization, and that would thrive. So when we talk about these global index indicators, we have to be mindful of that. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all, because different countries have differentiated policies and priorities depending on where they are. You have to take into account the context that you're dealing with. So that's one thing, my suggestion as to how we might consider coming up with indexes that we need to correct for, taking into account where we are in terms of development at country level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's really a very important point also to take into account and to remember that reports like the Global Knowledge Index, but say any composite indicator, we're just covering many countries. Of course, you have to take into account we have one common measurement framework which might not always say do full justice to one particular country. So it's always also very useful if you start using these kind of reports, if possible, also try to add and take into account, say, additional national level data that you could use to further enrich the already rich results coming from a report like the Global Knowledge Index. Then, it's not my role to do a lot of talking. Next, Dr. Conceição. You have been the lead author of the Human Development Report since 2019. So I want to ask you a question about your ideas about the commonalities, but also the differences between the Human Development Report and the Global Knowledge Index report, and also how both reports can be used to promote development, economic development, human development in economies.
Thank you. Well, one of the differences is that we don't have a setting as nice as this to launch our report. So congratulations, Hani, on the release of the report, to you and the team. And also, I want to thank my own team because they collaborated with yours in producing the index, particularly the revisions in the index. So I think one of the commonalities is this idea that sometimes we present concepts, we speak about concepts like knowledge or human development, and if we don't attach numbers to them, they become a little bit abstract, and they do not have as much impact in influencing decisions as is the case when you have a concept and attach to it a certain number that allows you to understand how countries are doing when it comes to this concept. So for human development, the idea, the concept is a very simple idea. It's the idea that people should be able to live lives to their full potential. Now, to try to quantify what this means, we have not only the Human Development Index, but a number of other indices. But to stay with the Human Development Index, it's composed of three dimensions: standards of living, a long and healthy life, second dimension, and the third dimension is knowledge. So here is another commonality with the Global Knowledge Index, because we recognize that a critical dimension of human development is knowledge, the ability of people to use knowledge, not only to be productive in the economy, but to interact with each other in many and be fulfilled in many aspects of their lives. So to conclude with the question on how do these reports make a difference, so from my experience, and I think, Annie, yours is probably not very different, countries do care about how they rank, how they compare with each other on these indices. And we do this not to put countries on the defensive and to say, well, you're ranking very low, but more as an incentive for countries to understand why are some countries doing so much better than others, and what can we learn? What kind of inspiration can we get from the fact that some countries are performing better than others? So in our experience, this is one of the ways in which our human development reports and our human development index has been used, and I believe the same has happened over the last few years with the Global Knowledge Index.
Yes. Well, I think that's really a very relevant point, and I was also just before lunch in a session about the real-world impact of the Global Knowledge Index. I was also referring to this, like take these reports not just purely for the ranking, but to identify, for example, your weaknesses, and try to identify other countries which are doing better in that particular area, and see what kind of policies did these countries, say, introduce 3, 4, 5 years ago, and see what you can learn from this. So these reports are a helpful tool, but will not provide you, say, with the information to actually design new policies, but they will guide you maybe towards countries from which you can learn to take the necessary ingredients to devise the right policy for your country.
Just on that, as the minister, if I can, as the minister said, each country will have to identify its own policies. A global report cannot provide a silver bullet or a template that enables all countries to find the solutions. It's the job of each country to do that exploration.
So this was the first round of, say, specific questions. I would like to use the remaining time to fire some shorter questions at all of you, and then you can answer them. Well, we could do a random order, but I suggest that for the first question, Dr. Torki starts, and then we follow the order, and then for the second question, Dr. Wuri starts, and then we just take that order. And just to get, and also feel free to reflect on, say, the responses of the panelists before you to try to get a bit of more, say, interactive and more dynamic session. Well, first of all, we all, I think, are convinced that knowledge is an important driver of development. So I would like to ask you if you think that countries are doing enough to promote the development, but also the use of knowledge, and if countries could do more in making, say, better use of the available knowledge in their countries. And I would say, Dr. Torki, you start and try to keep it short, but not too short.
هو بصراحة سؤال صعب يعني.
Such a difficult question. From my perception, countries don't do what is required of them for development or to utilize knowledge to achieve development. However, before I continue, I do agree with you that the indicator was not there to know who's where on this list, but we wanted to know what successful examples are there to fill in the gaps. An example, Switzerland. Switzerland did not hold the first position except in one sector out of the 6 ones. However, the other sectors are balanced. There's a balance in their approach to the knowledge work, and that's what allowed it to become to take the first position, because there is a balance between the different sectors. Not necessarily that I'd have to to excel in one sector and to neglect the rest, where they suffer from neglect that would lead to backwardness in knowledge, in economy, and others. Most countries, and especially in our Arab world, some sectors are in silos, as if they are disconnected from others. This would lead to a waste of time, of finance, and effort, ending with a result that is not satisfactory, neither for the citizen nor for their governments. This is what we notice in the Arab world. The other issue that we have, that there is not enough awareness amongst our citizens about the importance of the society of knowledge and the importance of knowledge in building knowledge-based economies. And I believe His Excellency Dardari has mentioned in the morning, if we measure between the global knowledge index and the human development index, 80% of the development that happen can be explained through the differences in knowledge, which means that knowledge has such a weight that is based in humanity. So we should have campaigns, awareness campaigns, and entities that are tasked with spreading awareness about the importance of that the human plays in building the knowledge economy. And I believe that countries have a lot to do, and they did not enough. 10% only of them did what they should be doing.
Thank you very much. From my perspective, knowledge is one of the most powerful and transformative tools that could be used for development because it shapes how nations solve problems, how they design policies, and how they create opportunities, sustainable opportunities. I know it sounds cliche, but knowledge is power. It's what helps nations to move from vulnerability to sustainability and from dependency to being able to contribute on the global scale and being able to forge equitable partnerships. But the second part of the question about whether or not I believe countries are doing enough, I don't think countries are doing enough, especially developing countries, where often knowledge that would give you data, be it from research or from other avenues, it's often underfunded. So we have fragmented approach, stop, start. So you're not really protecting the investments that have gone in. So the outcomes, the positive outcomes that you're hoping to see, takes a very long time for you to see them. So we need to do more in developing countries to invest in research, in innovation, in industrialization, and ensuring that we are doing things in a sustainable manner, but forging the right partnerships. So if I was to highlight 3 key priorities that we need to embark upon, is to invest in the ecosystem. Not just for research, but also for innovation. How do we use technology? How do we use emerging technologies to help us? How do we use technology to give us data and system strengthening that would help us in terms of efficiency, accountability, transparency, but generating credible data that we could use to develop national priorities and policies? How do we ensure that there's no disconnect between those generating the evidence and those who are meant to be using the evidence? How do we ensure that our higher educational institutions are working concertedly with ministries, departments, and agencies, engaging in research that speaks to contemporary issues that we're grappling with across the sector, but also thinking through the multi-sectorial lens, so we cannot afford to work in silos and create that linkage between our knowledge generation institutions, our higher educational institutions, and the ministries, departments, and agencies that will be utilizing that data. How do we do things looking ahead, horizon scanning? How do we support capacity development, research capacity development? So these are some of the things I believe that there's a lot more we need to do to ensure that we do more, especially within the developing countries, to be able to position knowledge generation at the forefront of developing policies that are reflective of the context and supporting national development. Thank you.
Just a couple of quick reflections. First on the analytics of development, and then something on the empirics. So Hugo, you said that knowledge is critical for development, and I think this is something that we all intuitively understand. But if you go to the analytics of development, this is actually something that is quite recent, because the most traditional models of development attempt to account for development in terms of inputs such as labor and capital. What was not explained by labor and capital was for a long time called a residual. So everything else was in this residual. And it was not until actually late in the last century that a new generation of models tried to bring in knowledge as an explicit input into production, into the production function. And I think this was a breakthrough in the analysis, in the thinking of recognizing and try to understand the ways in which knowledge actually leads to increased production, increased output, and increased standards of living. Now on the empirics, and you heard perhaps this morning from Rebecca Greenspan, knowledge is becoming more and more important in economies as a factor of production, as an input, and in the valuation of companies. A recent study showed that 90% of the value of the Standard & Poor's 500 companies quoted in the United States, 90% is accounted for by intangible capital. So by things associated with knowledge. So knowledge is becoming, it's not only important, but it's becoming more and more and more important. And the final point I would say is knowledge as an input into economic activities is a very strange input. And Abdallah mentioned this also in his intervention this morning. It's something that is not, it doesn't disappear or it's not depleted when it's used. Right? So most of the things that we think about, we have to compete. And if someone uses them, another person cannot use them. Knowledge is the opposite. Knowledge can be used at the same time by many people. Thomas Jefferson used the analogy of a candle, the light of a candle. You can use the light of a candle to lighten many candles, and you don't lose the light of the initial candle that was lightened, and you actually create much more light. So knowledge has these very strange and unique characteristics that it actually an input in production, but an input that can be used many, many times over. And this is something that creates huge opportunities if we find ways of harnessing knowledge as an input in production in the right way. And final comment is the importance of this knowledge, Global Knowledge Index, is that it shows the components that are needed to harness knowledge. So we need education, but that is not enough. You also need institutions that enable societies to generate, assimilate, diffuse knowledge in ways that translate into production. So there are many inputs that are required to actually make the most out of knowledge as something that can drive development.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also paying a little bit of attention to the amount of time we have left. So I'm going now to combine two of my next questions, and then you can pick maybe the question that you like most. First is that when economies are evolving, for example, evolving into a knowledge economy or an even more intense knowledge economy, people are affected differently. So how can we make sure that people, that within a country, but also between countries, that the benefits are distributed, maybe not equally, but relatively equally, and also accessible to all people within countries, but also between countries. But we also see that the world is changing faster and faster, and also knowledge can become outdated and can become replaced by new data. So how can we ensure that knowledge remains resilient, and that knowledge is also a tool that can offer solutions to the challenges that are coming forward from these changes? These are two questions combined in one, and you can feel free to either answer one of them or maybe even give a combined answer to both. And this time I would like to start in the middle.
Thank you very much. For me, that speaks to inclusion. And I think as government ministers, when we work, we have to ensure that we think of inclusivity and we leave no one behind. So do things through the gender equality, social justice, and inclusivity lens. So if I speak from the perspective of my sector, it means that when we're designing policies, we have to ensure that we're sensitive to groups that are largely or historically disadvantaged, so vulnerable groups. How do we ensure that we build policies that are gender sensitive? When we're thinking of introducing technology, because that's where the world is going now, 21st century skills, digital skills, how do we also ensure that we do not leave students with disabilities behind? How do we use assistive technology so they would also have access to the education and get the knowledge and be able to make informed decision? So that's one aspect of it. And then you also have to ensure that when going back to gender, ensuring that, if I give you an example, in my former life, I was working within the health space. And we had Ebola, we had COVID, and the value of community health workers became very, very important. And it became a national priority that community health workers should be absorbed onto the health workforce. But then that was a policy statement, but then when it came to implementing it, it was implemented through the lens of harmful gender and societal norms. Meaning that the policy directive was to recruit more female community health workers because their scope of work was largely centered around child and maternal health. But the reality at community level was that a young woman would not put herself forward for that position if there's a brother in the house or a father or uncle. So it's always about that. And then they would not put themselves further because when it comes to training was done in quite a distance away from where they are, and they have child-bearing roles to provide. So that's the point about gender sensitive, how we're very sensitive in the way that we create these spaces where people can be able to access knowledge. In the context of Sierra Leone, we also have, speaking again to gender, historically certain sectors are historically dominated by men. Science, technology, engineering, agriculture, mathematics. So these are historically dominated by men. And if you want to ensure that there is gender equality and we're not adding another layer of inequity in terms of access for female students, then at government level, what we're working on is a granting aid policy, a local scholarship that will remove the financial barrier for young women to be able to access training within those spaces so they can potentially take up leadership positions in the future. Because we cannot afford to have policies in the future within those spaces, and we're saying they have to be gender sensitive, but then we only have men around the table making policies, so it's going to be gender blind. So we have to ensure that we work now, we're proactive now, and we train young women, we train persons with disabilities. So when it comes to interpreting the knowledge and interpreting the data, informing policies in the future, no one is left behind. It's very inclusive, and every perspective is being captured. So for me, it's doing things through the gender equality, social justice, and inclusivity lens, and using technology to help us in achieving that common goal. Thank you.
So I'll try to complement, also discussing the issue of inequalities, picking up on the points that the Minister made. So I'll start with the issue of how is knowledge produced. So knowledge is produced as a result of a social process. Knowledge requires people, but requires people working together. Often we think of individuals that are brilliant, invented something, very good entrepreneurs, made a lot of money, or Nobel Prize winners. But if you listen to the speeches of Nobel Prize winners, I invite you to do that, they invariably started by saying, I'm being recognized, but actually the work that is being recognized was the contributions of hundreds of thousands of people. So knowledge is produced not by individuals alone, but by people working together. It's cumulative, it builds on what others have done before. And so one of the consequences of this is that there are very strong economies of scale that lead to people being attracted, people that are creative, that want to contribute to knowledge, to where those that are already doing that are in place. So this leads to agglomeration, economies of scale and economies of agglomeration. That's a problem because it can lead to concentration of the production of knowledge in a few places, in a few countries, or even within countries, in a few places within countries. So in a country like the United States, for instance, you have production of knowledge in the western and eastern coast of the countries, concentrated there, and less in other parts of the country. So this creates a problem of potential asymmetries and inequalities that I think we need to look at very carefully. The good news, though, is that it's possible to create the conditions by investing in people, by investing in institutions that enable this knowledge production to happen virtually anywhere in the world. So it's unlike mineral resources, for instance, that the country either has them or doesn't have them. Knowledge has this plasticity, this flexibility that can also be created anywhere. So there's a challenge because of these economies of scale and agglomeration. We need to invest over time and substantial resources, but there's also an opportunity in that with the right institutions and the right investment of people, it's possible to generate these knowledge creation dynamics.
I'm going to add just one thing, if I may. To ensure the equity in access, equality of access, especially when it comes to technology, and for technology to be available to everyone, that the traditional way, the traditional methods of education and schools would not lead us to equal distribution and access. And we need a clear set of ethics and morals that these things will not reflect badly on, this access will not reflect negatively or impact negatively society. So we need access to knowledge, good education, to empower children and students and to arm them with the right skills, taking into consideration the constant changes that are occurring in the technological dimension, in knowledge and in economy. And this might lead maybe to achieving equality and justice. And as Rebecca has said, 2.3 people all over the world don't have access to technology or internet. This will not allow, or will not allow us to achieve that equality of access to knowledge, because we need internet, right? This would require a good ethics, set of ethics to ensure that everyone have access for a skill-based education, rather.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm in a bit of a dilemma because we have 3 minutes left, and I think there's not really enough time to fire one more question at you. Instead, I'm going to deviate from my program and going to ask one more question to Hani. Today, the Global Knowledge Index has been launched. Some of us already have seen the report, but maybe you can also inform us about, say, the next steps. What are the next? Because I know that you have plans for further work, also further exploiting all of the work your team already has been doing and putting together the report. So maybe you can also inform us and the audience about what they can expect next year.
بالطبع احنا حاطين خطة.
Of course, we set a plan for the next year. For example, collaboration with the Pedro and his office. So thank you very much for helping us to set research and politics papers that to connect the index with the different sectors. Secondly, our statistical methodology is a new one. And I call upon all researchers to read that methodology. It's a new one, an innovative one. You can come up with many research papers out of it. And of course, we have Dr. Ali Hadi, the statistical expert who is with us here today. Secondly, we are still developing the data visualization tool that we have that enables countries to utilize this data and to find out their points of strength and weakness. And what we have planned for March, God willing, to calculate the index for 2024 with the methodology of 2025. So in retrospect, to enable countries to know how much advancement they had achieved, because the new methodology does not allow the comparison with previous years, because it's a new methodology, it's a new theory, a new statistical theory, or methodology rather. And the UNDP is going to send all the data of the results to the member countries, to the offices, and to the ministries to start the discussion with them and dialogue to fill in the gaps, that's first. Secondly, and to know your points of weaknesses and strength, and to know that there is no contradiction between, there's no crossover, there's no duplication of efforts to enable other countries to do what other countries did successfully, so that countries can help and enable one another.
Okay, thank you very much. We now have 15 seconds left. I feel as being a good moderator, I should try to close the session. I want to apologize I did not offer both of you another chance to share your ideas. Final words, I would, well, first of all, I'm honored to having moderated this session. And I would also like to thank you also on behalf of the participants for sharing your insightful contributions. And I would really like to follow up on what Dr. Torki said. Go to the website, use the report, look at the data, and really start using it. And also start using it, but also feeding, say any results that you have achieved, also informing the team, also helping them and further improving the knowledge index. Because we had a revision this year, but there will be another revision in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years from now. And knowledge is changing. The role of artificial intelligence is changing. And we also want to be able that we can also incorporate, well, when I say we, I mean, of course, the team can also incorporate these new developments in the next edition of the Global Knowledge Index. So we have a new one, which is an improved one, which is an exciting one, but we already have to start thinking about the next one. As we have run over time, I want to thank all of you for your patience, for your presence, and I wish you a nice afternoon, and also for tomorrow, a second nice day at the Knowledge Summit.